Hi everyone, and welcome to D&D Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player at a Dungeons & Dragons table that happens to be a cop, and thus threatens the DM with arrest for his own dumb mistake. A story about a woman that doesn't want her roommates to play D&D because she doesn't like it, and much more. So with the preamble out of the way, let's dive right into some D&D horror story cringe. Drunk Cop Threatens to Arrest Dungeon Master by Reddit user CyberpunkCrusader01. This happened at a game shop in the city. Generally, I play D&D with a fairly nice community. The Dungeon Master has been running games for our group, plus other players in the game shop, who come in and out of games, for years now. One of these transient players, as I will refer to him, happened to be a cop. He had been coming to the game shop for a few months by this point, and was chill with the DM. He ended up joining our table, and rolling up a drow wizard. Now, this guy had a drinking problem, and would often show up buzzed, or he would straight up bring beer or whiskey, which was technically against the rules, but the employees never really enforced the no alcohol rule. This led to his character being a bit chaotic stupid. Be it him getting involved in edgelord murder hobo antics, missing important information because he's not paying attention, or can't pay attention, talking over the other players, going on random rants that had nothing to do with the game, etc. When he got too drunk, we would just ignore him as much as possible. But he did get himself killed on this one mountain where our goal was to cross a chasm. He was particularly sloshed that day, and decided to use a 3rd level fly spell to cross a big ass chasm filled with enemy archers and evil birds. We all had previously decided to cross via the cave system. There was zero chance he was going to make it, and DM said, "Your character feels the cold, ethereal embrace of death as he considers what he is about to do." And then, out of game, says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And he says, "Yes, let me fly across it, damn it. Y'all are just pussies." And so he did. DM had him roll acrobatics to see how well he could evade the attacks to avoid an encounter that would almost certainly lead him falling to his death. He ended up encountering a gang of Aarakocra and rocks about 1/3 of the way across the chasm, and we were way too far to help him. The encounter was brutal, and he was downed, falling from a height of 4,000 feet and dying instantly. After a few seconds, it finally dawned on him that this wasn't a, quote, roll for death saves or wait for the party to heal you type of death. He was dead. And then he said, "What the hell, man? I was going to make it." DM said, "No, you most certainly would not. Even if you passed that agility check and avoided the encounter, there were several points in which you would have had to pass. It was practically impossible." The player then said, "Oh, I see. You just wanted to kill me off. And for what? You got a problem with me or something? You do know I'm a cop, right? I could have you arrested, bucko. And trust me, you would not last a day in prison without getting your a-hole rearranged." DM then kind of froze, as this drunk idiot was threatening him like this over a D&D game. Thankfully, one of the other players wasn't having it, and said, "Do it then. In fact, take us all down to the station. Drunkenly drive your beat-up car down to the police station and explain it to your boss that DM is under arrest for the high crime of having pretend birdmen roll dice to kill off your pretend dark elf." He then got up and stormed out while cussing DM out and ranting about how stupid the game was, and how he was never going to play D&D again. We never did see him back in the store after that. Well, imagine that. Someone with a semblance of power, using it to try and threaten someone. That almost never happens. But seriously though, I wouldn't be surprised if the employees at the store didn't enforce the no alcohol policy because this dude used his status as a cop to circumvent it or something. Now, don't get me wrong, I personally enjoy a beer or four while playing D&D, as it does help me loosen up and get more into the roleplay. But you gotta realize when to stop and not get totally smashed. It just sounds like this was a combination of this player being drunk and being a dick. Thankfully though, it sounds like OP and his group never saw this dude again, and luckily, he didn't harass them afterwards. Let's move on to the following story. Diarrhina, the worst person I've had to play with, by Reddit user Emperor JJ. During the COVID lockdown, I lived in a large house with 5 roommates, so altogether we had 6. Myself and my partner, V, another couple, C and Diarrhina, a master's student, RDM, and a college freshman, R, all insanely depressed, and most of us dealing with schoolwork. The master's student was a DM, and most of us had little to no experience with D&D. She suggested that since we were locked in together for weeks or months, it would be the perfect time to get into a campaign. We were all really excited in our session 0 building our characters, except for Diarrhina, who complained endlessly. I don't get it. This is too hard. Is this fun yet? Can I kill people with my mind? No? Well, this is lame. She was really harshing the vibe. We all keep insisting, politely, including her boyfriend, C, that she didn't have to play. In fact, if she wasn't having fun, we would rather her not play. She threw a hissy fit, saying that she doesn't want to play, but if we all play without her, she'll feel left out. A rock and a hard place. She insisted it was fine, and she's playing, though getting her to create a character was like pulling teeth. She ended up with a human child rogue that she named Diarrhina, a character whose only personality trait was being a bitch, and whose occupation was, quote, stealing. After our session 0, I talked to C and our DM. Most of us were hoping we could while away the hours of the shit down playing D&D, so we were going to start the game the next day. But now, we were all pretty concerned that Diarrhina would go out of her way to make sure we were all having as miserable a time as possible. It led to a house meeting where we all very kindly tried to explain that we would love to have her in the game, but she shouldn't feel any pressure. It's okay to not like it and not play. No one would hold it against her, but if she's miserable the whole time, it would make the game miserable for all of us. This led to her crying, asking why we were being so mean and ganging up on her. I cannot stress this enough. There was only ever one person who was mean in that house, and I'll give you one guess who it was. C apologized to the group after Diarrhina stormed out of the room and said that he would talk with her about it privately. The next day, we were ready to start, and she announced that she would be joining us. The campaign was meant to be cute and light, as insisted by the DM. It was a teen, quote, mystery gang kind of story. The DM starts bringing in the characters one by one, and we start getting into the roleplay, introducing ourselves. Then she gets to Diarrhina. She says, I shoot myself in the face. DM said, okay, you don't have a gun, so you can't really do that. And this was met with, I stab myself. I love our DM, but she is a shy, polite person who just didn't have the confidence to say, okay, you're dead, moving on. She tried to direct Diarrhina to specific actions that could move along the storyline. Naturally, our other characters didn't have much interest in engaging with Diarrhina, who continued to try to attack every NPC we came across before they could finish being introduced, stole from and attacked party members, and kept trying to come up with ways to off herself. Finally, C stepped up and told her that if she doesn't want to play, she should go, because we're just trying to have fun, and DM had put a lot of time into planning this game. She was being disrespectful and rude to everyone, the DM especially, and he would rather her just leave the game. Cue the crocodile tears. She cries that she didn't want to play in the first place, that she felt pressured, that she doesn't want us to have fun without her, so we should pick something else to do that she likes. And on top of it all, she will stop playing, but she won't leave the room. We continued the game, but she sat on the couch and pouted and cried for the rest of the session. This girl lived in this house with us. She had a bedroom to go to, though it was more important to her to make sure she ruined the game, whether she was in it or not. C announced the next day that he would have to drop out of the game because Diarrhina felt personally attacked by it. The rest of us tried to play one more session, but that was also sabotaged by her coming in, sitting on the couch, and making rude comments throughout. It was a huge bummer that we had to stop, because we all stayed trapped in that house for months. The game did not continue after session 2. That girl really had a knack for ruining good things. Well, that really sucks, especially for the DM, who probably spend a lot of time setting up the game for them. Some people just can't stand if people do stuff without them, and Diarrhina stating that they should all stop playing the game and do something else that she likes speaks volumes about her. Then, when she decided to, quote, play, she was just doing so to derail the game as much as possible. Then, even when she got her boyfriend to quit the game for her, she still felt the need to go into the room where the rest of the occupants were playing, just to make rude comments and ruin the atmosphere for everyone. Diarrhina sounds like a total narcissist, and hopefully, OP and the rest of the group that were interested in D&D eventually got to play after the lockdowns lifted. But before we move on to the next post, here's a kitty to try to get y'all to like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Yes. Like and subscribe. I'm making biscuits.
The internet runs on cats after all. But with that shameless self-plug out of the way, let's get into the next post. Awful First Impressions by Reddit user regularlengthiness9. I mostly played D&D with my group of friends via Roll20, since we live far apart from each other. I had to be the DM for most of my games, since everyone else was either scared of the responsibility or didn't know the rules that well. Luckily, I found a group online that was playing a campaign on Roll20, and they were looking for a player since a few people left. I made a character with the DM helping me with the lore. There were about 200 pages total, and I had just a couple of days to prepare. He was very friendly and helpful. He said that I would suddenly appear in a battle for a cool moment, and that I needed to target a wizard of some kind because he is important for my character. That seemed good for me. On the day of the session, I found out that the DM roleplayed as 4 NPCs in the party. One that was from the beginning, and everyone else was for all the people who left. That seemed weird, but I let it slide. When the session began, I immediately noticed how many things on the Roll20 map were wrong. Sizes felt random. The arrow to show the distance between spaces was showing quadruple the normal amount, and the map was, for some reason, on the token layer instead of the map layer. When I pointed out those things, the DM said, "That's how it's supposed to be." I said sure, and didn't say much about it. The session began with a fight against 6 enemies that usually just moved and attacked normally. There were 2 players and their characters, as I would join later, and 4 NPCs. A typical turn of a player took about a couple of minutes, but a turn for a DM-controlled character or enemy took about 10 minutes. Same for his reaction against attacks and stuff like that. The fight was so slow, my character appeared 2 hours into the session, and that was just 3 rounds of combat. I was a barbarian, so some of my turns took less than a minute. I targeted the wizard like the DM told me. He used a lot of spells and race abilities to lower my chances of hitting him. So, in 3 turns, I never hit him once, because even with good rolls, he gave disadvantage. After my last missed attack, the wizard teleported out of the battlefield, and we didn't have a way to find him because it was spontaneous. So basically, I waited 2 hours for me to even begin playing, and when I got that chance, the DM used everything in his power for me to not impact the battle in the slightest. So I just sat around for 4 hours, doing nothing. I left that campaign the next day. Yeah, that certainly sounds a bit frustrating. Though I will say, there were plenty of red flags there to guess that the game would not go that great. The fact that the DM was looking for players because a bunch left. The fact that the DM basically had more DMPCs on the board than players. Then, when the DM finally brought OP in, basically made it impossible for OP to do what the DM told him to do. So, yeah, after sitting around for 4 hours of basically nothing, I don't blame OP for noping out of that game like the DM's previous players did. But with that said, let's move on to today's final story. Rant, or Seeking Advice. My first problem player in my first campaign. By Reddit user ImpressiveOwl1398. Hey everyone. I've been running my first ever campaign for about 3 months now, and I really need to vent about a problem player who is making the experience more stressful than it should be. At first, the issues were small. He'd, quote, accidentally roll an extra die on attack rolls, claim his AC was 3 points higher than it should be, and spend more key points than he actually had. As a new DM, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, thinking it was just innocent mistakes. But over time, the problems snowballed. The metagaming became rampant, especially whenever he felt he wasn't properly rewarded with loot after encounters. If another player got a shiny new piece of gear and he didn't, he'd throw a tantrum in-game. He started lashing out at important NPCs, derailing important moments, walking all over dialogue, and steering the group into directions that were clearly bad for everyone. It feels like he's punishing the game whenever things don't go his way. Now, it's gotten to the point where I have to check his character sheet every session, and during sessions, to make sure there's no shady stuff going on. It's exhausting, and I hate that I have to be the fun police with him just to keep the game running fairly. The worst part? This player brought 2 other friends into the campaign with him, and they've been awesome. No issues with them at all. They're engaged, respectful, and a joy to DM for. But because I've known the problem player for years, I know that if I confront him directly or enforce consequences in-game, he'll drop out and probably take at least one of his friends with him. Here's the tricky bit. Outside of tabletop RPGs, he's fine. I don't dislike him as a person, but in this setting, he's become the worst kind of player. Hyper-competitive in a non-competitive game, always arguing over the rules, and constantly pushing back against authority. To make things even worse, he's older than the rest of us, so he's constantly little broing us, acting like the seasoned veteran who knows better. I'm sure some of you can relate. He's one of those can't live with him, can't live without him types of friends. But as much as I put up with his quirks, he's prone to big, fat baby fits when things don't go his way. And I really don't want to lose this campaign. I've spent a lot of time working on it and crafting the story, and I think I've done a pretty great job with the narrative. Everyone else, when they're not annoyed with him, has been really enjoying the game and has told me that they're engaged with the story. I've even caught them on Discord theorizing about where the plot will go, which makes me feel like all my hard work is paying off. All that to say, losing at least 2, if not 3 players in my 6-player party to remove one problem player would be devastating. Has anyone else been in this situation? How do you deal with a player like this when the cost of losing them is so high? Any advice on handling this without tanking the whole campaign? Well, that does sound like a pretty crappy situation to be in. Though I would say that if the player is only like this while playing and is otherwise fine outside of the game, then I would suggest just talking to him and bring up all the points that you did in this post. If he's really a decent person outside of the game, then I would bet that he would be receptive and try to improve his in-game behavior a bit. That way, you wouldn't have to worry about losing any players, and the game can continue without further issue. But if the behavior comes back, or doesn't stop, talk to the player one more time and tell him that if it does keep up, then you will have to consider kicking him. Hopefully then, with the threat of not being able to play anymore, he would finally change the way he treats the game. Though, what would you all suggest OP do in this situation? I would love to hear your opinions. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.